Welcome back. This is Father Sam Moorhead, and it's a joy to meditate upon the great mysteries of Advent with you in these reflections. Yesterday, we talked about the proto-evangelion, that first announcement of the gospel, when our foreparents, Adam and Eve, betrayed God, fell into sin, and they were dismissed from the garden. But even before they could be dismissed, God offered a promise that he would raise up a woman who would have a son, who would crush the head of that serpent, the devil. There was in that manifestation of a promise the presence and the revelation of God. God's practice throughout the Old Testament were gradual, periodic revelations, showing up, partial, in fact, not fully personal, as we find in Jesus Christ when we have the totality and the perfection of revelation made. But today, let us consider the theophanies, these manifestations, these revelations of how God did show up of old, so we can gain a unique appreciation and a confidence in that good work. For instance, first of all, after the time of the garden, we saw how God worked with Noah. Yes, the Lord sent this purifying flood, but he gave instructions, a word of command to Noah and his children to build the ark. And so they were safe on that ark during the time of great world flood. And of course, the archaeological and the geological evidence of the world indicates that there was a great flood at some point in the world's history. Of course, you and I have faith in that. Then, also, after that time, we see how God worked through Abraham at his time, that Abraham and Sarah being childless, yet God promising to be the father, that Abraham was given the promise to be a father of many nations. So three angels showed up to Abraham and to Sarah. These three heavenly visitors, a figure of the Holy Trinity, were announcing God's own plan and work. This was a manifestation of the Lord working in real life human history. And yes, a son did come 9 months later. Then we go down the line and we find, oh, the great time of Moses. The people of God were held in cruel slavery, bondage in Egypt. They called out for a liberator, a savior. God chose Moses. When he was out in the desert the first time round, he found himself at the base of Mount Sinai. He looked up and he saw a bush that was burning but did not consume the bush. That fire drew him up with a holy curiosity. He went into the presence of God. Moses was told, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for where you stand is a holy place." God spoke to Moses. Moses spoke to God. God gave Moses the instruction that he was to go and announce this liberation, but it would be God who achieved the work. Eventually, as they're on the Exodus, Moses, with his brother Aaron and the others, came back by Sinai, and Moses went up again, and there were multiple discourses with God, theophanies of God, revelations of God, God who gave the law, the ritual, the Old Testament practices, a vision of the heavenly temple, so as to eventually build a real one in this world in the course of time. And so we find that God is revealing himself and working with his people. That doesn't mention, of course, how God spoke to and spoke through the prophets throughout the great tradition following upon David and all the way down the line up till the Christ. David wanted to build that great temple for God in Jerusalem. His hands were too bloody. And so God said, "Lay up the materials, and your son Solomon shall build the temple." Solomon did build the great temple, but to David was given a promise, and it didn't refer directly even to Solomon, that from your loins shall spring one who will be a king forever, a messianic king. And so a promise of the Messiah was given out. We're told through the various prophets that he was to be born in the rather obscure Bethlehem, that he would be born of a virgin. He would be Emmanuel, God with us. He would be the one who would be the suffering servant, yet he would rise again from the dead. Every time that the Lord spoke to the prophets, every time he addressed the patriarchs, every time he did great wonders in the Old Testament, these were revelations, the showing up of God. And all of it pointed to some greater work yet to come. And that's what you and I prepare to celebrate in these coming days.